I recently had the biggest midterm rental summit on the planet in San Diego in April this year of 2024. Some of the top real estate experts were in the space, shedding some light on literally the best tips and tricks on how to build a successful real estate portfolio. I had a chance of having Codie Sanchez, one of the biggest entrepreneurs in the space, to attend my event. We talked about some super interesting stuff, specifically about real estate and midterm rentals. And you know what? She's not really that into real estate. I'm going to ask you something right now.
Ooh, tell me.
I know you don't like real estate. Why don't you like real estate?
Everybody's like, and we're leaving.
So why'd I even invite her? I think you should watch the interview once to know why. Welcome to the JV Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Vasquez. So you guys, how badass was Codie? Let's give her a round of applause. How freaking badass. Well, first off, I want to say thank you so much for being here. This is awesome, you guys. I can't even talk right now because she's awesome. But I'm going to ask a few questions. We're going to have about 15 minutes of just me interviewing her. I'm going to ask you something right now.
Ooh, tell me.
I know you don't like real estate. Why don't you like real estate?
Everybody's like, and we're leaving. Here's the thing. I own a lot of real estate. But real estate is one of the best ways in the world, I think, for people to keep wealth, right? It's an incredible mechanism for wealth preservation and slow wealth accumulation. Yeah. There are obviously strategies to use it to grow your wealth, too. And I think you teach many of them. But the traditional real estate market, when you go out and you have to get a mortgage for the average single-family rental in the US of $250,000, let's say, you have now what? A big personal guarantee over your head for that house. And what does the average single-family rental make in the US? $150, $300 a month, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And so my problem with real estate is that I think it's incredible, but I think it needs to be partnered with something that cash flows. Because then you take the cash flow and you can put it into real estate for preservation. But if you look at the Forbes 400 list, how many people got on there with real estate? Less than 1%. So real estate has made more millionaires probably than anything else in the world.
I agree.
But not more billionaires. And I want to be a Billy. I don't know about you guys.
All right, so I have a question on that now. Before we spoke, did you even know anything about midterm rentals?
No, he's schooling me on this super interesting industry.
Yeah.
And I love, anytime you can have an industry that has a moat around it to begin with, and you have your what? Your unfair advantage. Legal but unfair advantage. So I really like it.
I love that. And this is why I bring this up, because she mentioned this earlier. Riches are in the niches, right? Mm-hmm. This is a niche, and I hate that word so much. Niche.
He's fancy.
I just hate that word. But this is where I believe a lot of people could build something substantial. Do you see that? And I'm open to your, even if it's constructive, if you're like, Jesse, this is going to suck, I don't see it. Mm-hmm. I just want to be able to hear that from you, what your thoughts are on industries like this. Again, you're not a big fan of real estate. Yeah. I get it. It's a lot of money up front. But what's your thoughts on the little, small, portions of things like this?
Well, we have a mission at Contrarian Thinking, and that is get people into ownership. We've taught 3,000 people how to buy businesses. We've seen people go from one deal, one transaction, with not a lot of money, sometimes no money, sometimes other people's money, that does $1 million in net to them a year. And not only is it possible, it's repeatable. It is not easy, but it is simple. And there's an important difference between the two. And so if I was you, I'd do exactly what you're doing, which is you now understand a sector, a segment of society that is a niche. I would be looking for ways to do what we call at Contrarian Thinking a core satellite acquisition strategy. Your core might start out with midterm rentals. Right. I am going to either source them to other people, I am going to buy them for myself, I am going to be some intermediary in the transaction, core. But then my satellite to that business might be I am going to buy a portfolio of them as opposed to just one because there's less risk if you have multiple. It might be that I'm going to buy a property management firm to help my MTR strategy because property management cash flows and requires very little CapEx, capital expenditures up front. It might be that for my MTR strategy, I also want to own a social media agency. And so right now I'm spending money on paid acquisition to get clients. What if I just owned a portion of that and I turned a liability into an asset? And that is what the really, really rich understand. They understand that you would never just have your core, that every universe has satellites. And that's how I would play the game.
Exactly. Did you guys hear that? That's exactly what we've been talking about all freaking these last 3 days, you guys. I love that. She just said it in a way more eloquent way than I did. One of the other things that I think that is really cool about you, and a lot of us get stuck, we're in our own heads a lot of the time, and I kind of talked to you about this before. How do you get outside that norm of just like, I feel stuck, I can't move the needle forward, I feel like I'm positioned in a place that it's unfair advantage. And I've heard you talk about this before where you're like, I don't really actually believe in unfair advantage. Yeah. Where you're just like, let's do it anyway. So how do you, because I've talked to a lot of people and they'll always give me, I can't because, or I'm not able to do this because. Mm-hmm. What would be the thought process that you would try to give somebody that's particularly stuck on something where they can't move past it? Whether that's money, it's a financial, or maybe their spouse or partner is not willing to connect with them, or whatever it is. What would be the goal on that end?
There's a magic. Have you guys ever, how many people in here work out? Besides your MC, who does only working out and speaking. Okay, a lot of people in here work out. So there's something called progressive overload, right? Which means you start with a 10-pound weight at so many reps, and then you go to 15, and then you go to 20, and you progressively overload yourself. What does that do? That teaches your muscle to get bigger, right? And what's fascinating about life, the magic of life, is that the more hard things you do, the more hard things you progressively overload, the more hard things you are capable of. And so, I was sort of laughing. We had a snafu happen this weekend, and the same issue, the same problem that arose probably 2 years ago, happened again this weekend, except it was worse. It was like a bigger issue, could have cost us a ton of money. And the first time that it happened to me, what do you think I did? Like freaked out. The whole world was on fire. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but in my world, panic attack. Instant adrenal response. 2 years later, I was so beaten down by entrepreneurship that it really didn't register. And I think that our problem when we feel stuck is we have to look in the mirror. Every time you feel stuck, look in the mirror and ask yourself, have I done one really hard thing today? Just one. Have I done something that today I think is quite hard? And if you haven't, do the hard thing. And I can almost guarantee you that in any area of your life that you want to get better at, if you just choose to do one hard thing every day, that is more powerful than any tactic, than any tool you could possibly get. Because all that is building up your muscle of belief in yourself. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
The last thing I'll say on that is, there is a universe of people already telling you you're not capable. Inside of your head are the voices that you hear every single day. You're not enough. You're not good enough. This isn't going to work out. I'm not going to be able to do it. You're not pretty enough. You're not strong enough. All of it. The real tough part is becoming the type of person that looks at all of that and says, it's not who is going to let me, it's who is going to stop me. And the answer to that is nobody. And so build up your muscle of confidence by doing one hard thing a day, and I can pretty much guarantee that 1 year from now, there will be very few things that look hard to you.
Yeah, I love that. It's Charlie Munger quote that's very similar to that. It's like, if you're consistent with one thing long enough, it's almost hard to fail.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. It's actually, I believe that truthfully. So, speaking of mindset, like, how did you position yourself to get the mindset to push through a lot of those things? I think sometimes, again, a lot of us get stuck in these spots, but how do you help somebody, or how do you, push the needle along when somebody's mindset just isn't there? Is there any, steps that you would say, besides doing the hard thing?
Yeah. Well, one, you need to give yourself a pat on the back because you've already done it. I have this belief, which I can't prove to be true, but there are multiple studies, one that came out from Princeton that was fascinating. And Princeton showed that six-packs are contagious, which sounds crazy, except it's true. If your group of friends is fit and works out a lot, your likelihood of becoming more fit and thus eventually getting a six-pack increases. Here's the sad part. If you hang out with people who do not have the life that you want, or the health that you want, guess what? You are less likely to be that. In fact, there was a study done in companies across the US that showed that if you sit next to a high performer, they increase your performance by 15%. If you sit next to an underperformer, do you know what happens? They decrease your performance by 30%. So I like to think about it in dollars. If I make $100,000 a year and I sit next to a high performer, I'm making $115K, cool. If I make $100K and I sit next to an underperformer, I'm making $70K, not cool. And it's not saying that we want to cut people who are not at our level. We don't want to do that. But we want to be around people who already have our dream day as their Tuesday more often. And you are already doing that by sitting in a room like this instead of drinking Mai Tais on the bay.
That actually sounds kind of nice, though.
Like right after this.
Yeah, right after this. That sounds kind of nice. I think that's my buddy Rafa's favorite thing to do. He's like, I just want to retire and drink Mai Tais on the beach. And that's where I was going to go to next is, do you think it's, like, are you ever going to retire? Like, do you have is that your lofty goal, is to, like, drink Mai Tais on the beach somewhere? Like, what does your retirement look like? What is that? Have you sat there and thought about that before, Codie?
I think people only retire from lives they don't like.
Yeah.
You know, there is no better feeling than finding the thing that you are uniquely skilled at doing, that other people need and want from you, and the blessing of relevancy for getting a chance to connect those two. We humans really want one thing more than anything else, which is we want other people to need us and to think that we're important. That's almost the most important thing in our lives. At the end of our days, what do they say? It's not about working more. People aren't sitting at their deathbed saying, I wish I would have worked more. They're sitting at their deathbed thinking, I wish more motherfuckers were around me. I wish I wasn't here talking to you, journalist, because all of my family was here and we were hanging out. And how do you become needed, wanted, and relevant? You do something relevant and worth needing. And so I think we've been sold a bag of goods. First of all, you know, what doesn't sound fun to me? At 80 years old, going and sipping Mai Tais on a cruise with a bunch of other 80-year-olds? No thanks. I'd rather spend a couple weeks or months throughout the year while I'm still relatively young and spry doing it today. And instead of having a one-time retirement, I'd like to have many retirements throughout my life that allow me to refuel myself to create something bigger and better. But I can promise you guys one thing. When you are able to architect your life, I work more than I've ever worked. I work harder than I've ever worked. I probably have more stress than I've ever had, and I've never been happier. And it's because I'm the architect of my life. And that is what we want to do. We do not want to retire from a life we love. We want to never die.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. You guys, Codie freaking Sanchez, you guys, she's the baddest. Thank you so much. You're a badass.
Man, thank you.
Thanks so much. You're awesome.
Thank you, guys.
You guys, give it up for Codie. Give it up for Codie. Come on. Thank you for listening to the JV Podcast. I'm Jesse Vasquez, your host. I appreciate you for listening, and if you could do me a huge solid, go like and subscribe to this. This helps us tremendously. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.